Welcome back to Nutrapreneur, the hub for unveiling groundbreaking insights into the nutraceutical industry. I'm your host, Bethany. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Zack Abbott, founder of ZBiotics. Under his leadership, ZBiotics pioneered the first genetically engineered probiotic drink designed to break down acetaldehyde, the byproduct of alcohol that causes some of the next day misery after drinking. Zack, it's so great to have you today.
Yeah, really excited to be here. Thanks for having me on.
So, first off, I think it would be great if you could just please share with us the inspiration behind ZBiotics and your journey from inception to founding this innovative company.
Yeah, the true inspiration here was as you said in your intro, right? We launched the world's first ever genetically engineered probiotic of any kind, and I think the inspiration for the company was really around that scientific idea that we could take a probiotic and engineer it to do something specific or provide some kind of like unique benefit for people. And so I was just really excited by that idea scientifically. Taking a step back, my background, I have a PhD in microbiology, and so I spent my PhD and actually some time doing research before that, studying bacteria and kind of how they work. And like many people, like my initial understanding of bacteria was that they were bad, that they cause disease, they made you sick, and that's true. But it's actually only a small percentage of the bacteria that we interact with can make us sick. Most of the bacteria we interact with are actually either neutral or beneficial. And as I learned more about kind of all the things that are happening in our body and in our environment, and all of this stuff is being made possible by bacteria, I was excited to think of ways that we could leverage these these positive interactions with bacteria to improve our health in some way. And so that fundamentally was kind of like the inspiration for ZBiotics, was like, how do we like harness the good of bacteria in like new and interesting ways using modern technology? Because probiotics have been around for a long time, but I think that like to date, it was sort of like people are just kind of like scouring nature or looking at like the leftovers of the food industry and say like, hey, here, I hope this helps you in some way. And then we could sort of take that and refine that down into like a very precise tool that provides a really precise benefit. So when I looked around, I didn't really see anybody else doing it. And so I thought, okay, well, then I guess if I want to do this, I guess I'm going to have to do it myself. And so that's kind of what the inspiration was for ZBiotics.
Yes, that's amazing. And like you said, I think probiotics have been around for a while. People are familiar with the term probiotics. And so, navigating a competitive market, how has ZBiotics managed to maintain its transparency, its commitment to transparency and safety?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that is really how we differentiate ourselves in an environment that is very noisy. If you look at the probiotics industry, I mean, everything has a probiotic in it. Now, people, there's a lot of excitement around this as a category. And so there's a lot of brands popping up that are like, throwing probiotics into everything. But really what they're doing is just taking bacteria that we know are safe from, centuries of use in the food industry, largely in the dairy industry, and then putting them into, whatever, chips, soda, whatever to make it like, quote unquote, like healthier. But in reality, those bacteria are probably not optimized for human health. I think the most generous thing you could say is that they can help some people sometimes. But in reality, everybody's microbiome is totally different, and their gut community is different, and their biology is different. And so there really aren't these kind of like silver bullet bacteria that can just go in and uniformly kind of provide generalized health benefits to everybody, which is I kind of think where the probiotic industry is currently sitting. And so we took one of these bacteria and then we engineered it to perform a very specific function, and that function is beneficial to you. And so really the bacteria, the probiotic, ends up just being kind of a chassis for this function. And so being transparent about that is really that's like fundamental or essential to us, like differentiating ourselves from kind of all the noise out there, right? Like saying like, hey, we used modern biotechnology, we used genetic engineering to make a product that's better, that provides like a very specific benefit. And like here we can point to exactly what that benefit is. And you can evaluate for yourself whether or not you think you're getting that benefit. So transparency is everything to us, because it's really kind of like our unique differentiator in a very like noisy and undifferentiated field.
Yes, absolutely. And I think consumers are seeking out that transparency as well. They want to know what they're putting into their bodies, they want to understand and educate themselves. So I think it's great that you're very transparent with your business.
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely think that that's true all the way across the board. Consumers want. I think we're seeing this big boom in kind of like the supplement industry in general, which I think indicates that it's a clear indication that consumers want to have more control over their own health, right? They want to be proactive. They want to show up and choose things that are going to help them, and they're willing to do the research and learn about it. And now, whether or not the quality of the information they get is good or bad is still kind of like a challenge, of course. But people are out there and they're trying to learn more, and a way to learn more is making sure that like the companies that are providing these products are hopefully giving you information and giving you good information. And so, for instance, like a few years ago, I actually testified in support of a bill at the California legislature to provide more transparency to probiotics labels to at least indicate what bacteria you're putting into the bottle at a strain level. And so I think that like ultimately there is a movement towards this, and some brands are trying to do this, right? Like and it's, as with anything that comes with business, it starts to get like tainted. But like the idea of like making sure that we know what strains are in the bottle, making sure we know how many CFU are in the bottle, things like that, right? So those were kind of like the early things, like, hey, we should have transparency around that. And then brands started to leverage that to like kind of like warp the messaging and like say that like had like more CFU, which meant that was like better, and which is not microbiologically speaking true. And so there's a lot of like challenges and push and pull on this. But ultimately, I think at the end of the day, high quality information is like, if you're building a good product and you have a good business, then you're of course an advocate for high quality, transparent information, and that's how we feel about it.
Yes, absolutely. And you're obviously a scientific guy. So, can you explain the science behind ZBiotics
Sure.
probiotic and how it helps with those rough mornings after drinking?
Yeah, absolutely. It's my favorite part of the job is talking about the science for sure. So essentially what we did, as I said earlier, is we took a probiotic bacteria, and so bacteria perform thousands of biological functions as just a normal course of their life, and most or all of those functions are really optimized for the benefit of the bacteria. And so then we sort of, historically with probiotics, we give you this bacteria, and it's just kind of we dig out of the ground or whatever, and we say, here, eat this, and hopefully some of those functions it's performing will tangentially benefit you in some way, but we don't really know how and why and or when. And it's going to be highly dependent on kind of what's going on in your body already as to when and what they're going to do. And so we said, okay, well, like let's provide some sort of like direction or specificity to that. So we took a bacteria and we engineered it to express one additional function in addition to all the other things it's doing for itself. And that one function is meant specifically to benefit you. And so in this case, with our first product, that function was the ability to break down acetaldehyde. And acetaldehyde is this toxic byproduct of alcohol that initially forms in your gut, then gets kind of absorbed in your bloodstream and kind of wreaks havoc and creates some of sort of like those like kind of like next day symptoms that you might feel the day after drinking. So the idea was that like if we could engineer bacteria to help you break down that acetaldehyde that forms in the gut before it gets in your bloodstream and kind of wreaks havoc with the body, then that would result in you feeling better the next day. So you take our probiotic, it goes in, it does all the normal things it would normally do, which may or may not matter to you at all. But then in addition, it does this like one thing that is breaking down acetaldehyde.
This episode is brought to you by NutraPayments.com. If your business needs credit card processing that fully integrates with most major Nutra software platforms, offers the lowest industry prices, and has built-in features like recurring billing, $0 trials, and chargeback prevention, then visit us at NutraPayments.com for a free online quote.
And that we thought would be uniformly beneficial to somebody who is consuming alcohol. And so that's really the idea. So you drink the probiotic before you drink. It gets into your gut and starts making this enzyme that breaks down acetaldehyde. And then if you drink alcohol afterwards, as some of that alcohol gets converted into acetaldehyde in the gut, the bacteria are there to help break that down. And so that's the idea. And then the next day you wake up and hopefully you feel better than you felt otherwise.
Yes, it really is just such an interesting and unique concept. And so how do you ensure that ZBiotics stays at the forefront of innovation while adhering to all of the rigorous safety standards and regulatory requirements?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I'd say like, candidly, or maybe like a little flippantly, like that, like it's not hard to stay at the forefront of innovation in the supplement space. There hasn't been a lot of innovation in the space. A lot of people, I'd say, are sort of like pulling things off the shelf and putting them into a bottle and then putting a new brand on it, or like sort of like doing these like quote unquote like proprietary mixes and things. And so there really isn't a lot of innovation for new ingredients or new functionality. And so the idea that we're using modern biotechnology to make a probiotic that does something new is innovative. In fact, it's the world's first. And so, and look, I'll be totally transparent and straightforward and say that like what we're doing is not particularly like challenging from a technological standpoint. Like the technology that gives us the ability to make these products has been around for decades. It's just nobody's been really applying this in the kind of like consumer supplement space at all. And so even like that small amount of innovation puts us at the forefront. And so a lot of what we do at ZBiotics is advocating for the use of this technology to like bring the supplement field forward, kind of like into the 21st century, which is very much stuck in like the 19th or maybe 20th century. And so I think that like, and you brought up safety, which is something that's really important to us. As I said, we kind of use like the very basics of this tech, and the reason we do that, we take a very conservative approach to the way we genetically engineer. There's a lot we could do with this, a lot more than what we're doing, but we chose to, in the beginning, to kind of like stick with like the low-hanging fruit, the stuff we understand the best, the stuff that we know is safe. So for instance, with our first product, we're starting with the bacteria called Bacillus subtilis that you eat every day of your life already. It's a very safe bacteria. It's everywhere in nature. It's a soil microbe. It's all over, fruits and vegetables and all of your kitchen and all of that. And humans have been intentionally using this to ferment food for centuries. So it's a very safe bacteria. And then we just engineered it to express one extra protein. And this protein is called an acetaldehyde dehydrogenase. It's an enzyme that your body already makes, that many of the microbes in your gut already make, that 70% of all life on the planet already makes. So we're really combining two things that we know to be very safe and that your body's very familiar with. And we're just making sure that you're getting enough of that enzyme at the right time, like when you're drinking. And so that's really like all we've done. It's a very simple and like tiny step forward. And yet it's like the bleeding edge of the supplement field, right? And so, and we advocate for very conservative use of the tech because there's so many things we can do with very safe and like restrictive guardrails, like I've just described. Just like not breaking any sort of like evolutionary boundaries or kind of going out into the wild and crazy Frankenstein world here. Like we can do some very basic things and create a huge amount of benefit beyond what already exists, kind of like in the field. And so that's a lot of the work we do is we call it GEM, or genetically engineered microbe, GEM safety. And we talk a lot about like setting up guardrails and guidelines and best practices for the whole industry. I mean, right now, our focus is on building a whole new category of genetically engineered probiotics that are, the next level of product that provide like unique benefits. And we're currently a category of one. We're the only one in the world. And so we're really trying to kind of like set guidance and best practices because this is going to be a whole category. Other companies are trying to work on this. And so we want to make sure that like there's a pathway forward that is like safe, responsible, transparent, and being applied kind of like for the best possible outcome for people.
Yes, absolutely. And, you've already said that transparency and education are really the core values for ZBiotics. So, how do you promote the understanding of genetic engineering's benefits to the public?
Yeah, I love that question. As I said before, I mean, it's not just like a virtue or value. It's essential or existential for our existence, right? That like being transparent about the use of genetic engineering is what we're founded on, and it's our mission. And is really elevating the conversation around genetic engineering. I think a lot of people hear like GMO, and they think like, first, I mean, probably your mind immediately goes to, Roundup Ready corn and soy, right? Like that's what a GMO is, and it's like it's true that those are genetically engineered. However, that is like one application of the technology. Fundamentally, the tech is just about like bringing new traits to living organisms. And so we've been doing that for centuries, millennia, in form of selective crossbreeding, things like that. And so this is just a more kind of precise version of that, and it's a tool. And at the end of the day, it makes products, and those products could be safe or unsafe. And so it's very important that we apply the technology responsibly, just like we would do with any technology, right? Like you can apply the technology of metallurgy to make a spoon, or you can make a gun. And those obviously are very different products, very different safety profiles. And so we talk a lot about the fact, and so to elevate this conversation, I think it's really important for people to see that the technology results in products that they align with. And so every bottle and box of ZBiotics says proudly GMO on it. And we connect that technology, genetic engineering, to the benefit that you would get, right? Like, so when I walk into the grocery store and I have a choice between GMO corn and non-GMO corn, there's no benefit to me to buy the GMO corn, right? Like that benefit was for the farmer. But so if I don't know much about it and I've heard that it's bad, of course I'm going to buy the non-GMO corn, because why would I bother? I don't even understand why that was done. But if I walk in the grocery store and I say, oh, this probiotic is engineered to help me feel better the day after drinking. And this probiotic, I don't know what it does. Like, I want that benefit. And so, and that benefit is made possible by genetic engineering. Then in that moment, we now have like an opportunity to kind of see that there are different applications of genetic engineering, and they can be done for good. And I think that the bigger vision, the bigger purpose for ZBiotics is around the fact that like genetic engineering can be used to do all kinds of amazing things that align with people's values and can benefit humanity. They can help us feed a growing population of people. They can help us deal with emerging infectious diseases. They can help us combat climate change. Like there are many applications. Like this is a very important tool in our tool belt. And I think it's being kind of thrown under the bus by these like health washed like companies that are making, non-GMO potato chips. And apparently because they're non-GMO, they're healthy for some reason, which is just not, they're still potato chips, they're still bad for you. And so unfortunately it's kind of been like this like lever, this marketing lever for a lot of brands, and it's at the expense of a technology that is very important. And so certainly not advocating for the fact that like every GMO is good. That's not true. That's not the case, right? Any technology is going to produce risk and challenges and products that maybe we don't align with people's values, and that's okay. But that doesn't mean that the whole technology is bad. And I think that's really our ultimate mission. And so making products that people want and that they're excited about, and connecting that benefit to the technology, saying that like the reason this product exists is because of the tech, is a great way for us to at least create some elevation and nuance to a conversation that has been very much like good or bad, or is it or isn't it? And so that's been really important to us.
Yes, and I'm sure you're constantly navigating the challenges of public perception and regulatory landscapes. And so what advice can you give to budding entrepreneurs that are in the biotech space?
Totally. So I'll say that first and foremost, one like myth I really love to bust is that like there's a perception that everybody is anti-GMO, because when you walk through the grocery store, you see this like non-GMO butterfly everywhere. And so you assume that, well, that must be what everybody wants. But in reality, if you look at like unbiased surveys, actually the vast majority of people in this country are pretty much like ambivalent. Like there's a small and vocal minority who are staunchly like anti-GMO. But I think that most of that, like I say, is really kind of centered around some of the products that have been made with genetic engineering. They really equate GMO with, Roundup Ready corn and soy. And then there's like a small percentage of people who are excited about genetic engineering. But the big middle is people who just don't really care one way or the other and don't know much about it. And so when you ask people, like when I call somebody up and ask them about it, and we did a lot of like consumer surveys and interviews and things to learn about how people thought about genetic engineering when we started the company, the most common thing I heard was like, I don't really care about it, but I think everybody else does. So you probably don't want to talk about it. And I always thought that was funny, because it was like when am I going to meet somebody who says that they care? And even when I did talk to people who were really like, we did surveys and we found people who were really like staunchly anti-GMO, and they consider themselves well educated on the topic. Even when I talked to them, I said like, ask them where they got their information and where their distrust came from. Like I say, it was heavily focused on sort of like specific agricultural applications. And then usually like they really felt like that there was room for improvement. Like in very few cases, people feel like that like there was no opportunity for genetic engineering to provide a good benefit. So with all that being said, I don't think that it's as like toxic of a of a disclosure to say you're a GMO as everybody thinks it is. In fact, indeed, what we find is that it's not at all a liability. It's an asset. It sets us apart. When we see that proudly GMO label, like if we advertise that in like Facebook ads, we get lots of clicks. We get a lot of interest because it's provocative. It's totally differentiated from what everybody else is saying. And it's validating. People are like, wow, I know genetic engineering does something. And so they're more interested to learn kind of what the product is. So I guess like one of my big pieces of advice is that like, I see that a lot of times I go to these conferences where companies are working on building new supplements. They're kind of like bending over backwards and twisting themselves in a pretzel to not use genetic engineering to get the same outcome. They'll go and like scour hundreds of thousands of new strains to try and find one that performs a function they want, rather than just taking an already safe and clearly characterized bacteria and engineering that function in itself, right? Like much safer, much more direct approach than like trying to find some random, totally uncharacterized bacteria that happens to perform the function you want. You have to start from scratch, and it's a lot of action. So one thing I would advise is like, don't bend yourself backwards and not use genetic engineering just on the false assumption that consumers will outright reject any GMO no matter what. That's ridiculous. It's like not at all how people work. They want products that provide them with a benefit. And then the other piece of advice I have is that if and when you do use genetic engineering, don't hide it. I think a lot of companies who recognize the benefit of genetic engineering are afraid that consumers will reject it. And so even if they use it to make amazing products that provide incredible benefits, they try and like, massage it or hide it or nuance it, which only further drives mistrust, right? It's like, well, if you're hiding it, then it must be bad. Why didn't you tell us? And so sort of like this self-fulfilling prophecy of like fear that is like reinforced by like a lack of transparency. So those are like kind of some of the big piece of advice I have. And then I'd say the last thing is that like, as you're thinking about applying genetic engineering, I think that like with any technology, there are safe ways to do it. And there are ways you can do it responsibly and build products that are really great. And then there are ways that like, I think introduce undue risk. And so we're working to, as I say, develop like guidelines and make it very clear and easy kind of what risks to be aware of and what things to think about. And I would encourage generally to kind of like research the field and talk to others in the space, talk to us so that we can all get aligned on like what are the best applications that improve kind of the category while also kind of like being in a safe sandbox.
Yes, no, those are all great pieces of advice. And I think embracing the benefits of genetic engineering could really disrupt the market in a positive way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And given the unique positioning of ZBiotics in the market, what do you envision for its future? Are there any exciting projects or innovations that are on the horizon?
Absolutely. So to be clear, I did not start this company because I was really passionate about making sure that everybody felt better the day after drinking. That just so happened to be a really great proof of concept kind of first application of the technology. It was, when I started the company, I didn't anticipate that that's where we'd start. I just was really excited about the idea of engineering probiotics for benefit. And as I started pitching ideas, that one was at the beginning almost like pitched kind of as like, honestly, as like a joke. Like I was just like, we could do anything. And people got really excited about that. And it kind of kept moving up the list as I saw that like people understood that problem. It was like this very nice like visceral readout so people could really like feel the benefit for themselves. So I started to say, this is actually like a cool idea. And like it really could provide a lot of benefit for people and all that. But ultimately, the vision here is about building a whole category, probiotics engineered to provide all kinds of benefits to basically help a healthy person live a life in a world where it gets increasingly hard for people to live a healthy life, right? We have a lot of like highly processed foods that are engineered to like taste good and hit all of our reward circuits in our brain, but aren't necessarily good for us. The air and the water are more polluted with, heavy metals and microplastics and all the things that kind of like come with progress and advancement of the human race. And so it just makes it harder and harder for people to live healthy lives. So we can engineer probiotics that can help combat some of those challenges, those toxic products that we kind of can avoid in our lives when our diets are more difficult to kind of regulate, all things like that. So yeah, there are many kind of products in our pipeline. We're excited to be announcing soon our second product, which will be launching in the fall. It's totally different than the first one. Does a completely different function related to kind of everyday health. And so we're really, really excited about that one. And we'll be announcing that really soon. And there's several other products we have in our pipeline. And I'll say that like I unofficially or officially advise like several other companies that are also working in the genetically engineered probiotic space. So there's a lot of exciting stuff, I think, coming in. Right now, it's a category of one, but 3 years from now, there will be like dozens of products in this category. So I'm really excited about that.
That's fantastic. Sounds like you have a lot of exciting things ahead this year and beyond, even. So,
Totally.
once again, Zach, thank you so much for sharing ZBiotics' captivating journey. And for our listeners that are eager to explore ZBiotics further or to review their products, we've provided the necessary links. Do subscribe, drop in your thoughts, and join us in spotlighting the nutraceutical world on social media. Until our next episode, stay informed and inspired in the vast expanse of nutraceutical innovations.